when he said that the whole arena erupted in hand claps. People were clapping. But later in the day, just walking out of the arena, you find out that fuel queues started building up at the fuel stations. And one begins to wonder, were they just waiting for the president to speak before they shut down the fuel stations? And that, even this morning coming out, people were already queuing up at the fuel stations just to fill their tanks. Yesterday there was a press conference, and I think Kayode said that to us about the GCEO, the group CEO of NNPCL.
GMD, actually.
What they put there is
GCEO.
GCEO. You know, talking about no panic buying because there's enough fuel. So there has to be clarity, as in what exactly are we talking about here now? Are others going to be allowed to bring in fuel? We heard that during the launch of the Dangote refinery, I think you said by the end of May or June, sometime in June, the first set of produce from the refinery will hit the market. Would that make any difference? So a lot of questions coming up here, but hey, subsidy is gone. And there's no reviewing it, I guess.
What an inaugural speech. Well, I did say that, you know, the question is, you're allowed to say anything. The president has said what he wants to say, what is on the topmost of his agenda. The question is the how and the consequences of that. I mean, I immediately talked about how the markets were going to react to that, were they going to welcome it, how were they going to welcome it, especially since his speech also dwelt a bit on monetary policy. I understand that the CBN governor was there, and, you know, I heard he had a very interesting facial expression when the president spoke about monetary policy. Well, we're going to be focusing a great deal on the speech today, so I'm not going to preempt our guests who will be speaking to us. They are the experts. But for the people, for ordinary people like you and I who are not experts, what they heard was the subsidy was gone, and immediately they know that what it might translate to is that they're going to be buying petrol at a higher price. And so you see people immediately queuing at the filling stations, perhaps trying to get the last bit of petrol they can get to buy at that same price. It'll be interesting to see the coming days how this eventually translates into a reasonable price for the average Nigerian to be able to get petrol into his or her car. It'll be very interesting to see how it translates into, you know, knowing how much we truly consume as a country. Because right now, we understand that after the House of Representatives investigated for over 17 months, they couldn't come to a conclusion as to how much Nigeria was truly consuming and how many liters of petrol it was actually paying subsidies on. So we're hoping that these sort of interventions in the coming days, there'll be more clarity, as Nyota did state, and that, you know, we will get to see even more clearly what our true capacity is, what our true consumption capacity is, and what our true production capacity could be, because people have said there is no need. Why are we still importing petrol? Why is it that our refineries here cannot work? We know that the Port Harcourt refinery, some work is being done there, and maybe it should come on stream sometime soon. The Dangote refinery, a privately owned refinery, has been commissioned, and we wait to see just how quickly it will come on stream. But in the next coming days, we know that it's going to be a bumpy ride of sorts, because we do know there is no way that the president would have said that and the markets would not react whether negatively or positively for now until they find the equilibrium. Where that equilibrium will be at is what will be interesting to see for many Nigerians. Ayo and Kayode.
I know a lot of people are probably listening to us at filling stations right now, you know, while they're queuing for petrol. It is important to state these facts. First, the budget for 2023 says that subsidy will not be removed up until the end of June. Okay, so we're still at the end of May, right? We've not even started June. So whatever is happening is clearly as a result of just what the president said and not what the budget reality is. The budget reality is that the government says it will still pay subsidy up until June. Now, what happens after June is subsidy removal. So we're still in the grace period. So let's be fair, let's be honest. You cannot stockpile enough for the month of June. So panic buying is playing a major role in all of this, okay? At least going by what we have on that budget. But let's talk about history here. We need to always refer to history because Nigeria has had a lot of missed opportunities to do this. In fact, this current government was against subsidy removal during the tenure of Jonathan in 2012. Remember that New Year's present, the removal of fuel subsidy, and then there were protests, Occupy Nigeria protests. That was, over 10 years ago, in fact, that was 11 years ago, that this could have been done. I will not be where we are today, but there were lots of protests. Some said it was political and all of that. By the way, the Jonathan government had done some sort of, meetings, deliberations. So we're planning to go around the country. But the major issue that a lot of people faulted that Jonathan government for was that there wasn't enough buy-in or enough consultation. The words just went on, and it was shut down. A lot of people also said that the former president, Muhammadu Buhari, had a choice or a chance to remove it at the start of his second term. That was the thinking of a lot of people too. So 2019, this could have been removed as well, but it did not happen. The Buhari government, tinkered with it back and forth during the course of the second term, but it never really removed it in its time, but left it up until June. Now the Tinubu government, first thing in office, said, subsidy is gone, we're not going to continue doing this. And it raises the question, the things you said the Jonathan government did not do, the deliberations, the consultations, have you done all of that? Because that was a major issue. People said, you don't just throw this on us, ensure you get our buy-in, get the buy-in of this, that, and that. Have you done that? Because that was a question on my mind. Did we do those things? Did the government try to, simulate the things that will happen? This panic buying, for example, do you have a solution to it? What might come out of it? Labor's response, all of that. Did you simulate it and think, okay, if this happens, this is how we'll respond to it? Because if anything, this government does not need to hit the ground running. It needs to hit the ground flying. We cannot take all of those, back and forth, the reluctance, the slowness. No, that is not where we're at right now. So the question is on the table of the new president. Yes, there was that dinner and all of the pomp and pageantry, but there is real work to be done. And has this government done that? That's a big question for me.
Well, without making a case, if you listen to that speech, the inaugural speech yesterday, part of the first things that he said was commending the decision of the outgoing administration in phasing out the petrol subsidy regime, which has increasingly favored the rich more than the poor. As you said, it's merely a statement of saying the fuel subsidy has been removed by the outgoing government. That's pretty much what I understand it to mean. In other words, fuel subsidy is gone. It's not something that he is going to do. The current president is going to do, from my understanding.
Well, he had a chance to either return it or continue with it or not. So
exactly.
He's chosen not.
Yeah. But he said, look, since the outgoing president has done it, it's gone. Well, maybe that's a safe haven of sorts. I don't know, but it is gone. And I think what's important for us this morning on the program is just raising the issue of the fact that it's just an announcement, not an implementation. And guess what? You also referenced something that a number of people are also aware of, which is the comment of the GCEO of the NNPC, Mele Kyari, saying, look, yes, we welcome the position of the president on fuel subsidy, but there is no reason for people to panic. Just go to your Twitter handle, just search for fuel price. Put it in inverted commas or in quotes, as we say. What you will find out will amaze you. Someone even posted and said, look, just an announcement that has been made is from 400 to 500 to 600 fuel price in some areas of Owerri, Imo State. And that is not government. That is not anybody. It's the old stock. It's just an announcement made. Old stock, and then there is a fuel price increase. So many times, where I usually put this, where I usually docket this kind of thing is this the governor? Is this the president? It's our way of loving or not loving ourselves, and that for me is a critical thing, because at the end of the day, if we loved ourselves enough, we'll consider that my action is going to impact something. That's a worry. Just yesterday, as soon as I was done on air, I usually buy my fuel, top up at half tank. So I went to this particular fuel station. Of course, NNPC fuel stations were already had long queues.
Oh, yeah.
So I went to this fuel station, which hitherto had its pump price at 190. I got there yesterday, it was 210 naira.
Oh.
I saw a video this morning, I don't know whether it's new or old, says the fuel price is 600 naira. Is that the president? Is that the governor? Is that the NNPC? So it's us as a people. And I think it goes back to what the former Vice President Osinbajo just said about ethical revolution. We should look at these things ourselves, show love to ourselves. This is not just whether or not something government did or didn't do. The reverberating effect, we can't even imagine it. Someone said, and I think it was the president of the AFDB, saying that it's cheaper to import into Ghana than it is to import into Nigeria. Consequently, the things that people buy are more expensive in Nigeria than elsewhere. Why? Simply because of us as a people. Is there anything we can do to help ourselves, love ourselves, make ourselves live better lives, love the country, love the Nigerian? NC.
Whatever we decide to do as a people, one way or the other, it would always have an impact, whether as an individual or a collective. So on that understanding, as I had already said, that understanding that whatever I do or say would have an impact on the next man will go a long way moving us forward. If we do remember what the president said, it says, let's be united. I think we should begin to think about how much of a Nigerian are you? How much of a human being are you? And then how much of a Nigerian are you? So that knowing that whatever you do or say is going to affect the next man will go a long way in getting us to where we need to go to. But we will take a moment and we will be back to look at what the papers are saying. Don't go away. And we'll start out with that story on the front page of New Telegraph. 16th presidential inauguration. Tinubu removes fuel subsidy. Inheriting security, ailing economy. Continues on page 2, 3, and 5. Reviews Naira policy, that's how they captioned it. Vows to rejig security architecture, create jobs. Prioritize security, economic challenges can. US, UK, Saudi Arabia, others in bilateral meetings with Tinubu pledged support. I guess when he left the inauguration grounds yesterday, he just went into these meetings through that yesterday. I mean, so I've had these meetings with the US, the UK, and Saudi Arabia. All of that. Well, it's going to be a busy one for the president, for this new administration. A lot of things to look at, but apparently he started by saying what he thinks will be done or what he's decided to do in line with where the government administration is taking the country. Besides that picture of him signing the dotted lines, Governor Makinde Abdulrazak Oborewori, Oti, Alia Mba, others take oath of office. 28 new and returning governors yesterday took their oaths of office. Why are you smiling, Markwe? It was our name, right? We'll get used to it.
Indeed, you will.
We'll get used to it. PDP vows to recover stolen mandates through judicial process. Continues on page 2 and 5 as LP faults Tinubu's speech. And Governor Yusuf sacks Ganduje's appointees, revokes asset sale. That's called hit the ground running. we will still see more from across the country. That's from Kanu. Governor Yusuf sacks Ganduji's appointees, revokes asset sales. Page 28, you see more details. Subsidy removal. Marketers foresee fuel hitting 500 naira per litre. Before this announcement by the president, and even before the budget of 2023, fuel was selling for as much as 400, 450 in southern Nigeria. Enugu, to be precise. I bought fuel for 450 naira per litre, and it's across. It's not as if you go to some filling stations and it's 210 or what. No, 400. 450.
Some parts of the southeast, or many parts of the southeast, if not the entire region, really never buy petrol at the official rate that it has been declared, and that has been status quo.
And
for
some parts of the south as well.
Oh yes,
even though that's where the crude oil is coming from. It's not selling at the pump price.
And many parts of the north.
And many parts of the north. But don't worry, there will be sanity someday, somewhere, somehow. And see the Q's panic buying resurface. We are not aware. President met with critical stakeholders. NLC's talking tech. Page 2 and 4 for details. And this one, exercise might boost tolerance for pain. That's for health. Exercise might boost tolerance for pain. So go do some exercise. Page 26, and we will leave it there for the New Telegraph.
Well, take a look at what The Guardian has on the front page. They are immediately hitting on the consequences of petrol subsidy removal. Scarcity trails subsidy removal as Tinubu begins house cleaning. That's a lead story on the front page. They have pictures from the inauguration, from the presidential inauguration yesterday, him in that motorcade, and also signing the dotted lines there. And they've also broken down for you Tinubu's house cleaning agenda. Right there, subsidy removal, higher GDP growth and job creation, reintroduction of commodity board, monetary policy house cleaning, self-sufficient economy, food security, unified exchange rate, 1 million jobs in digital economy, etc., etc. Somewhere inside of the paper. And look at this obituary, a very big one. Niroko fell in the broadcast industry yesterday. Dr. C, I have lost a friend, brother, says Atiko. That story is on the front, well, it's somewhere inside the Daily this morning. Page 3 is where you find details. The chairman of AIT, Dar Communications, when, shall we say, slept and never woke up. May his soul rest in peace, we say. Let's leave it there for the Guardian newspapers.
Amen. Well, the Nigerian Tribune also has that story on its front page. Raymond Dokwesi dies at 71. It's right there, page 25 for more details. Indeed, a lot of people will remember him for his exploits in the broadcast industry, private, television and radio. A lot of people actually grew up, with that sick tune in their minds to remember till today.
I think it was the first
private
radio TV, I'm not sure, but I remember the commissioning was chaired by the former head of state, Abdulsalami Abubakar. I remember vividly because I was home that day. It was work day, but I was home that day. I had just returned from a trip the day before. I think it was a Monday. So yeah, it was a very, very courageous thing to do at that time when the economy was absolutely unpredictable.
Absolutely. Well, the big story on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune is on President Tinubu. It says President Tinubu's era begins. And then there's a list of his policy thrusts. Of course, we'll be taking a look at some of those major, subsectors or subset of the thrust this morning. But that's the big story, and we have images from inaugurations across the state. Indeed, it's not just the president that took the oath of office.
I think
lots of governors.
That point needs to be
very important.
Repeated.
So as we pay attention to the president, we also need to pay attention to all the governors.
Absolutely.
28 of them, and even the ones that didn't take the oth of office,
or
that are
still
in office.
Will be renewing their oath of office
by
later.
November. Yeah, so that's it for the Nigerian Tribune.
Daily Trust newspaper is literally paying attention to the federal and states this morning with its own headline, fuel subsidy is gone, Tinubu says, and a number of other things you'll find. Pledges, Naira redesign review, higher growth rate, wants interest rate reduced. I'll work with you, Biden assures president. And then inauguration from the states you also find there. Tambuwal shuns inauguration as APC's Aliyu takes over Sokoto. Alia freezes Benue accounts. I will sustain peace, resettle more IDPs. Zulum will improve lives of banditry victims, fight ghost workers, that's according to the Katsina governor. Gombe governor pledges to clear backlog. A number of other stories, but this one is interesting. Call me Malam, not His Excellency, new Jigawa governor. The details you'll find on the inside pages.
Call me what?
Malam, not His Excellency.
Yeah, perhaps we need to see the. Sometimes I think about it. I mean, there needs to be that excellence in
before you
governance.
Excellency.
Before you just earn it. It's not fair to just earn your excellency just out of the blues like that.
Okay, the same way Lagos has Mr. Governor, but not His Excellency. Okay, that's Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
Well, take a look at leadership newspapers, and they have this one for you. At inauguration, Tinubu hits ground running, lists critical reforms to focus on economy, power, agriculture, security. Fuel subsidy gone, double taxation, interest, exchange rates for review. Don't rush to remove subsidy, Nupeng warns. UK, US, Saudi Arabia envoys in bilateral meeting with president. In states, governors make commitment to good governance. Then they also have special inaugural photos of governors on page 10 of the paper. So in case you missed that, you might want to flip to page 10 of leadership newspapers. Look at that. President Atiku Obaseki, others mourn as Raymond Dokwesi dies. They also have the announcement for you right on top of the nameplate. Buhari family return to rousing welcome in Daura. That is also right there on the front page. National airports named after Awolowo, Okadigbo, Danfodio, others. The announcement also came a few minutes, or shall I say a few hours before the exit of President Buhari from office. That story is on page 7 of the paper. Subsidy removal, Nigerians may pay 700 naira per litre for petrol from July. So again, do not panic buy. There's still subsidy in place until the end of June. At least so says our budget, while we wait for the workings. Yes, show me your workings. For the workings of how subsidy is truly to go and how it's going to work out with those in the private sector. Don't forget that the NNPC has also been privatized and it needs to make profit. So let us see how that is going to run for the company. We'll leave it there for leadership newspapers. We'll also leave it there for the dailies today, this 30th day of the month of May. I'll be back in just a moment to hear what the analysts have to say about that budget and also what's going to be happening in the economy. Please stay with us.
It's the 29th of May, the day when Nigeria transitions from one administration to another every 4 years. The Eagle Square in Abuja is littered with security agencies and radiates beauty from the decorations and the colorful outfits of invited guests who await the arrival of the main actors of the day, the outgoing and the incoming president. In attendance are the outgoing Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, former President Goodluck Jonathan, and former Head of State, General Yakubu Gowon, Presidents of Ghana, Rwanda, and South Africa, as well as government officials, federal lawmakers, royal fathers, and state governors in whose states there will be no handover are all in attendance. The president-elect and his wife arrive and are received by the outgoing secretary to the government of the Federation. The arrival of President Muhammadu Buhari signifies the commencement of the event. Straight away, the Vice President-elect takes his oath of office, administered by the Chief Justice of Nigeria. Then comes the man of the moment, Senator Bola Tinubu, for his oath of office.
I, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, do solemnly swear.
The national and defense flags are lowered and replaced with new ones, indicating the transfer of power to President Bola Tinubu in the presence of the outgoing president. President Tinubu takes a ride around the Eagle Square to inspect the guards and appreciates the guests. Next is the military parade in slow and quick time. This is followed by an aerial display by the Air Force. The already colorful ceremony is further embellished with dance and acrobatics display. Then it's time to hear from the new president. His speech begins with the unity of the country as he extends a hand of friendship to his opponents in the presidential election.
My supporters, I thank you. So who did vote for me, I thank you as well. I extend my hand across the political divide. I ask you to grasp the national affinity and brotherhood. For me, political polarization has faded away. All I see here are Nigerians. As long as this world exists, Nigeria shall exist.
Perhaps the high point for many as his stance on fuel subsidy, security, and the foreign exchange rate.
We shall reform both our security doctrine and its architecture. No provision is there for fuel subsidy. The fuel subsidy is gone. The central bank must work towards a unified exchange rate. National slow, peace and arms.
The hearty cheers and 21-gun salute welcome Nigeria's fifth democratically elected president since the return to democracy, President Bola Tinubu, and also signifies the seventh consecutive democratic transition. The president now has his work cut out for him as he's promised, among other things, to unify the country. From the Eagle Square in Abuja, Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
And that's where we will start out from. Yesterday was the whole nation was inaugurating at the state level and at the federal level. There were inaugurations in 28 states, and new administrations came into being. In the Federal Capital Territory, the president was inaugurated. President Bola Tinubu took his oath of office and read out a very strong speech. And some have also questioned portions of the speech, while some have said, a good speech shows the nation's on course going somewhere. Who are we? But to ask the question, see how that speech ties into the realities of today. We talked about earlier today about fuel subsidy is gone and how the cues have emerged. So weighing the pros and the cons of our conversation today. And to help us in this direction is Professor Ken Ife, a development economist, here with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Prof, we always know that, speeches, inaugural speeches usually try to focus on the most pressing thing at hand for an administration. And yes, even though, of course, there are many preambles to this particular speech, we're talking about the Nigeria as a whole first, and its future, also acknowledging rivals, underscoring the political nature or the political circumstance of his emergence as president. I think a large chunk of it focused on the economy. The Economist, was given a separate subheading, but then many other aspects of the economy also had their subheaders as well. And so some people would say that this speech focused largely on the economy. Does it for you immediately impress home where it is that we are in our country?
It does, actually, and it's a very good speech. However it was put together, it was a very good speech. First of all, he began by reaffirming the indivisibility of Nigeria, by comparing, that was good. Then he talked about peace and security. In the area of peace, he just reaffirmed people's right to go to court, to challenge, and he has an open arm. So he's okay with that. Then in security, very, very, very reassuring that he's going to put an end to what is going on, all this whole thing going on in all the geopolitical zones. But then he now came into the economy through looking at investment. You see, investment is the key, because anything you want to do in the economy, you've got to be ready to have an investment. If you don't have that money, obviously you're going to go out borrowing. And if you go out borrowing, you also go out sorrowing. So he reckoned that is very critical. How do you promote foreign investments to come in, and how do you promote domestic investment to give it? So obviously issues like that, multiple taxations are always on the mind. Peace and security is always in the mind of people who are going to invest. And if you are looking at investment, remember that the medium-term development plan is looking for 350 trillion naira, of which government is only going to bring 50, just under 50. And then the private sector will bring 300. 15% is what the government is going to go for. So you have to be sure that the environment will encourage private sector to bring that order of revenue, investment that you want them to bring in. And then, of course, you have to look at where are you investing this in the critical sectors of the economy. You raise infrastructure. We know that infrastructure, we're only 30% to 35% stock of infrastructure compared to South Africa, over 80%. So we always know that power, road, rail, all of those, they are all under the infrastructure. Then you have investment in human capacity. Many economies like Japan didn't have it in terms of minerals, and they're the third biggest economy in the world. And he came back to that capacity investment by saying subsidy removal, that money will go to invest in health and education. And then, of course, solid mineral and natural resources, agriculture, #1 in natural resources, is looking for investment in some of these areas. So he tidied that up, peace and security, investment, before now coming into the main domain of the economy to look at monetary policy. He says he's going to do a lot of house cleaning, which everybody knows is inevitable. But then he has his eyes set on particular objective, bring down the interest rates. Is within the purview is part of the mandate of the central bank, without a doubt. Then he also looked at unifying the rates over time. He wasn't saying today it must be one rate, because that could be preemptive of. So he gave that. So we know where he's going, and over time, I'm sure he will going to get there. Then he also put a target on growth, which is very interesting. He says minimum of 6%. Is it achievable? We can discuss that. I think it is going to be achievable. Because if you come to GDP, there are 4 things you have to look at. How does he boost investment, which is I've already talked about. How is he going to promote output? You've already seen, for example, investment in agriculture and all of that will increase output. How about consumption? That's another area. Okay, part of it, as you've seen, is doing something about consumption from a petrol perspective. But finally, how do you narrow down the trade imbalance and then balance of payment imbalance? Because all these 4 enter into the GDP calculation.
You know, I was just going to be asking him, you know, what part of the speech excited him the most. I know that as a development economist and one who's also focused very largely on the economy, this speech, you'd be like, this is my forte. I mean, I'd very much like to see the how of how we break down certain things. Agriculture, he's already said he'd like to see the commodity exchange boards come back and that rural farmers' income is secured. But for you, what part of this focus on the economy excited you the most?
What excited me the most is 3 emphases that he made. One is the investment side, because investment, you see, in economy, you have to have investment to create economic activity, which in turn creates employment. Employment gives you disposable income. From disposable income, you can fight education, poverty, invest in education and health. That's the cycle. If you think you can come and rob Peter to pay Paul, that is not production. You know, so we've got to get that clear. So he got into that territory. The second area that attracted me was go to raise revenue. Revenue. It's talk about debt. Our debt ceiling, we haven't even reached our debt ceiling, and we are nowhere near what developed economies that are growing and doing everything are taking. Ghana is almost 91%. But he grew his revenue. And I know that he probably will drop something on revenue, because there are many things, there are many leakages and many other things that could be done to boost revenue. And of course, you have the new Murphy and all of that. There are many things that could be done. Once you can get on top of revenue, even the 24 trillion we are all crying about, ways and means, they will become insignificant. Because when you grow your revenue, you grow your GDP, it becomes smaller money to pay. You know, you don't even feel that anymore.
So then, need to just
the third one,
real quick, this matter of revenue generation, how would that tie into the issue of fiscal discipline as against monetary discipline?
No, the area of revenue generation is that you have to look at 3 aspects of revenue generation. One is, what holes do you have to plug? What aggressive program are you going to do to widen the tax base? Because we're already collecting only 7% of our GDP as government revenue, compared to the average in Africa is about 18%. And many are doing over 22%. South Africa is about 24%, Ghana is about 12%, so 15%, 18%. So we're going to ramp up revenue there. But it's not about taxing the inevitable suspects. It's just about widening that tax net. And then, of course, raising things like VAT for some critical goods, some export. But there are aggressive other programs on raising revenue. And when you talk about raising revenue, don't look only at Naira. Everybody's looking only at Naira. It's not just Naira. How about revenue from Forex, dollar revenue? That's where you come. Who is the player in the revenue? NNPC crude, 79%. Gas, 10%. Between the two, 90%. So it's only 10% that is within the purview of central bank, where you are talking about remittance and other invisible inflows, and then you talk about foreign direct investment, portfolio investment. That's very small. And if, for example, NNPC crude was beginning over since 2014, was giving 3 billion every month to CBN, and now dropped to 300 million. You have to ask questions, and you have to look at the demand and supply side of this. What is the demand? The demand is elevated when it comes to import, because an import-dependent economy, but the supply is so constricted. So whenever you're going to do anything there, please look at the demand and supply situations and see, because it's a pricing mechanism, and see how the chance that they have to come closer before you order. So there are other things. But the third one I was going to is industrialization and value addition. Because if you don't do value addition, then you'll still be caught in the web of simply producing commodities and selling, and you will never win. You will never grow. You continue to go down in real terms. But when you now add value, by industrialization. Then you have product that is going to respond to an export-led strategy. Export-led strategy is what has developed most Asian economies, that they focus on export and then carry the whole economy, everybody behind, with them. That's where you get growth that is going to be inclusive, growth that will have implication for poverty reduction, growth that will lead to diversification of your economy. Otherwise, you can have paper growth, no food on the table. Nobody is carried along. It doesn't include anybody. Poverty worsens. You can have growth, yet you have all those. But it's only when you add value that you actually begin to carry all of this on board. And then you will see what AFCTA will make meaning to you, because now you have a product that you can push to Africa. When you are signing an agreement with European Union, and you have a product that is fit for international market. And that's the third one, and that's where we need to put a lot of thoughts and resources to.
Let's just get to Lagos. Our colleagues say have something else. Ayo.
Well, thank you, Nyota. We have Mr. Paul Igbinoba with us here this morning. He's an economist and a business consultant. He is also team lead at ProServe Options, economic research, business and strategy consulting. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Permit me to deviate slightly from the core issues. The announcements that have been made by the president are very bold and, how do we say, not political. If I don't know if, the issue we've had over the years, especially perhaps since the Jonathan days until now, is what people call political will to get these things done.
Yeah.
With all these announcements, as Malkwe has pointed out, in the economy, agriculture, fuel subsidy, job creation and all, do you see the political will in the president to do the things that he said he would do?
Well, I think the President Tinubu, basically has hit the ground running. From the policy perspective, he has demonstrated political will, in being able to decisively announce that there will be an end to fuel subsidy.
On that, my apologies, on that, it was in the middle of the pandemic that the GMD CEO of the NNPC at the time said that fuel subsidy was gone. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources also came out and supported the same thing. But here we are.
Well, those were political statements.
Not policy statements.
The reality was that Nigeria has had fuel subsidy for a very long time. At no point has it been removed. The Jonathan regime made a move to remove fuel subsidy, all right? But it was aggressively resisted, all right? Even the parties now, even the current governing power, who were there in opposition, were among those who vehemently opposed that move. But the reality is that there has always been a need to remove fuel subsidy because it doesn't make economic sense. You don't subsidize consumption, all right? It generates a whole lot of economic inefficiency. What you subsidize is production to reduce the cost of production to producers as an incentive to produce more.
I get you, sir. But what's the assurance we have that the president will not capitulate if the labor movements, all come out again and say, we don't want this?
Nigeria has very little options now. We're actually facing a severe financial crisis. We are living on borrowed money, all right? The revenue generation of government doesn't cover up to half of is essentially less than half of the budget. The rest is through borrowing. You can't go on that way. We have essentially overborrowed. Unless we are courageous now, and that's what the president has just done. He has shown uncanny courage to address the issue right away, to hit the bull in the eyes, so to say, by saying, look, there is no provision in the budget for fuel subsidy beyond June. So there's no money. So what do we do? I mean, you can't come to start your term by borrowing money. All right? Already, the middle-class government indeed has borrowed recklessly. I mean, I say that with every sense of responsibility. All right? We've grown our debt to almost 70 trillion. I think 77 trillion. All right? That is financial recklessness. Because we don't have the capacity to sustain that level of borrowing. Now, for those who are opposing, those who want to oppose the removal of fuel subsidy, the question is, what are the options? There are no options. We've been saying for a long time that fuel subsidy makes no sense. And in any case, who are the beneficiaries? It is the middle class and the upper class, because the poor actually benefits very little from fuel subsidy. So it doesn't make any sense.
And I know the thinking for a lot of people is that even if it's little, the people are benefiting something, especially the people that want to fuel their motorcycles, their blending machines, the vulcanizers, the ones that have generating sets to run business. That's the thinking. And Labour has said that, well, before you remove subsidy, fix the refineries. And that has been a back and forth that is ongoing. But the president made a promise that we shall instead rechannel the funds into better investment in public infrastructure, education, healthcare, and jobs that will materially improve the lives of millions. And my question is, how well is this being communicated, or how well should the government, what should the government do to ensure the buy-in of people? Because when you look at it, the estimates made by the World Bank, for example, for subsidies for this year, says it will be 5 trillion naira or even more. Our budget deficit is over 10 trillion naira. Government revenues estimated to be about 9 trillion naira. So if we were to remove 5 trillion from at least the 10 trillion, that will be literally halving it. But the question is, some have said, we don't even have that money anyway. So if you were removing subsidy, there's no money to put into anything, because you probably have had to borrow to pay for that subsidy. So really, are we going to be reinvesting that money, since we won't have to borrow it anyway?
Now, the removal of fuel subsidy will give the government some financial relief, some fiscal relief, all right? The money that you would have borrowed to finance fuel subsidy would not need to be borrowed anymore, all right? And that creates some leeway, some financial, fiscal leeway for government to be able to reorganize. What is going on now is an attempt to reorganize, reorganize and refocus the Nigerian economy, across the board, fiscally, in terms of revenue and monetary policies and all that. So if the president and the federal government can sustain this policy move to remove fuel subsidy, that would be a huge relief. Now, the NNPC Limited, the GMD, said Nigeria now spends 400 billion naira monthly to finance subsidy. That's a huge amount. Now, that money can make a huge impact on infrastructure, a huge impact on the health sector, on education, and other priority areas. Now, look at our health sector. It's suffering. Why are doctors leaving? Because this sector is hugely underfinanced, all right? If you allocate, for example, 100 billion naira to the health sector monthly, it would make a huge difference to the financing of in any case, health and education are key to human development. That's what the people actually benefits, all right? If you look at the Asian tigers and those economies in Asia that have done so well, they allocate a minimum of 15 to 25% to education every year. If you look at the Sustainable Development Goal 4, the average investment in education is about 15% minimum, all right? So we must begin to emphasize investment in human beings.
Well, that's the promise.
All right?
A number of people.
Investment in human beings, which the removal of fuel subsidy we allow. So just frittering away our resources and living on, and continuing cheap petrol, riding cheap cars, that's second-hand cars, buying cheap petrol. It's not the way forward.
Okay, well, Mr. Binoba, many people, someone watching now will say, look, we've heard these kinds of things before. We've heard these promises before.
Yeah.
Whether or not it'll be done, I think that's another thing altogether.
Yeah.
Joining us again in this conversation is Mr. Wale Oyerinde, who is Director General of Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. He joins us virtually. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Oyerinde. So, well...
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, a number of promises have been made here and there by the president and in his inaugural speech concerning the economy, agriculture, fuel subsidy, monetary policy, and the rest of them. Which of these stands out for you as the DG of an employers consultative association?
Thank you for having us. A hard question you asked. But I must say, all the items he mentioned, from the issue of the interest rate to fiscal and monetary policy to security, infrastructure, they are all quite germane. They are all quite important to organize businesses. And the political will, as you have mentioned earlier, and the desire to make it work is what we are looking at. It's still less than 48 hours to the inauguration, after the inauguration, and those statements made. And someone will say, we have had those statements before. We had people reel out the challenges. In fact, we all know the challenges. We all know the issues. But the fundamental thing you have mentioned, and which I want to align with my opening speech, is the framework. What we need now is the framework to achieve all those laudable things that the president has mentioned. And without a proper framework to guide us through the implementation, this might just be another beautiful speech that has been made. Without fiscal responsibility, this might just be another statement, another beautiful comment that has been made. And without stakeholders and citizens' consensus around these policies, this might just be another statement that has been made by the president. If you notice, probably on your way to the office this morning, there are fuel queues. Why are those fuel queues coming? And that is the need for us, for the president to exercise the political will immediately, for the president to start mobilizing the citizens, start mobilizing stakeholders behind his policies. Not just the policies, but the framework to achieving those policies. That is the direction we think they should go. That is the direction that we will support, and that's the direction that we think will help us to achieve results faster.
Well, Mr. Oyerinde, one of the things that the president said in that opening speech, if I can use the term as you used it, was about industrial policies being adjusted or reviewed to promote what he calls domestic manufacturing and lessen import dependency. He also talked about, in the agricultural sector, he talked about agricultural hubs that will be created all over the nation for production and value-added processing. In terms of framework, what would be your proposition, the proposition of your part in the organized private sector, in order for these things to not just be talk, but to actually be experiential realities?
Yeah, we support the fact that the industrial policy should be reviewed, but you cannot just review the industrial policy without taking a critical look at the enablers of industrialization. You might have a beautiful document, but if the regulatory framework is still skewed towards stifling that process of industrialization, then you always come back to you probably be rigmaroling within a circle. So let us review the international policy, but let us also take a critical look at the enablers, the regulatory environment, the legislative environment, and the personnel that are meant to implement those regulatory environment. Are they at the policies or at the implementation of those frameworks? Will they be pro-manufacturing? Will they be pro-growth? or they will stifle that same industrialization policy that you have created. One thing we saw during the twilight of the last administration, probably 2, 3, 4 years, 2, 3 years before the end of that administration, is serious contradictions. You have good policies, we must say, good policies, focused policies that are meant to drive growth, drive manufacturing, but you still have inherent in the same system other agencies of government, other policies that are neutralizing that same policy you have created to drive growth. So what we will request, or what we will advise, is beyond reviewing, then we have to deal with the issue of the regulatory environment to make sure that it complements the industrialization policy and doesn't negate it. They have to work hand in hand and side by side. There must be alignment between all those policies for us to achieve the results that we want to achieve.
I think one of the major highlights, and I imagine that will be very important for you, is talk about jobs, employment. And at this point, I know that we're meant to get some unemployment figures this month. I don't know if it's coming out or in the next, but there are projections that we might be hitting over 40%. And, you know, the president in his speech particularly talked about his government working with the National Assembly to fashion an omnibus jobs and prosperity bill, talked about 1 million new jobs in the digital economy. We clearly have an emergency on our hands when it comes to jobs and unemployment. Do you think that he said enough to tackle the concerns you have and millions of unemployed Nigerians regarding job creation?
Thanks. I think seriously that it doesn't have the whole time yesterday to share more details. So we'll accept that what he said was just a tip of the iceberg. But seriously, I think you cannot legislate jobs. You don't legislate jobs. You don't create jobs by fiat. You know, the last government also came up with the issue of 10,000 jobs, 1 million jobs, 10 million jobs. You don't create jobs by fiat. If there's a general consensus globally that out of every 10 jobs created globally in any economy, 8 or 9 is created by the private sector. I won't want to go into the controversy about whether government is supposed to create jobs or government is supposed to run businesses. Those are for other conversations. But 8 out of 10 jobs is created by the organized private sector. And if you want to really deal with the issue of job creation, then you must focus on supporting the private sector so that they can be sustainable, they can grow, then they can generate maximum employment for our country. The digital economy, beautiful, but we cannot just focus on the digital economy while we have not maximized the potential in the construction industry. We have not maximized the potential in the manufacturing industry. We have not maximized the potential even in the informal sector. So we must create a structure that promotes the growth across board, inclusive growth, some have called it. And that is where we think the president should focus on. If we don't, the same way we crippled the manufacturing, unconsciously or consciously, we crippled the manufacturing sector. The same way we crippled some other sector, we also create focus on the digital economy, and at the same time, through the inherent contradictions that we have, we also stifle that sector. So our view is this, and our advice is this. The challenge of solving unemployment, the issue of unemployment, should be all-inclusive. Create an environment, an enabling, that is the foundation, an enabling environment that will allow the organized private sector to grow. There lies our first opportunity in resolving this issue of unemployment.
After all, you cannot grow the economy if there aren't jobs, if there isn't productivity. And he made the promise to increase GDP to 6%. That is very interesting, especially seeing how well or otherwise we have grown over the past 8 years. But we'll take a look at that when we return from this break. Don't forget, we still have Professor Kenny Faye in our Abuja studio, Mr. Paul Igbinoba right here in our Lagos studio. It is a full panel, so please don't go away. Welcome back. It's a big one, the economy. Yes, there's security, there's all of that, but we're focusing on the economic thrust of President Bola Tinubu. And we have Professor Kenny Faye also with us. He's been speaking about, his views on the president's speech and particularly about the GDP growth. Prof, I know we've had that conversation with you time and again on this program. Our goal for a lot of people should be double-digit economic growth, but he has said 6% for a lot of people. That is even better than where we're at. But if we would achieve that, first, there's no time frame to that. So let's sort of try to give a time frame, especially with the exigency of our situation, and what needs to be done to achieve that kind of growth.
Well, let me just clarify something. The fact that we are hoping to boost GDP growth rate to 6% doesn't actually tie to employment, because there are more things underneath. You can have growth just by borrowing more money. The statistic doesn't know whether the investment is from borrowed money or from domestic. It doesn't even know. That statistic doesn't know. And then you can borrow that money and waste it and put it in uneconomic activity, or use it to pay salaries. It doesn't create jobs. So you can see how investment may not necessarily lead to creating jobs. Then also, if you borrow it and consume it, consumption part of GDP will go up, because over 70% of our GDP is household consumption. Again, you can see that you can consume and it doesn't lead to growth. So what we want is a situation where you are tuning up the investment, you are increasing output, which is matched by consumption, and then you're also correcting your balance of payment and trade deficit. So when you have all those moving in that direction, then there's a chance that that borrowing or that growth will be inclusive. That is, it will include other players in the economy. Then it will also show that that growth is coming from a real output, increase in output, which also pushes the overall employment. Once you increase output, employment follows. So all of that, and then it could also lead to poverty reduction. And then again, that means it's not only inclusive, but it's also leading to poverty reduction. So that we need to make all that connection. Is it possible that it could get up to 6%? Why not? We can even hit 6% before the end of the year. Can we go to double digit? Easy. We can go to double digit. But we have to tie up all the loose ends. And the loose end, the key one is, how do you stop this hemorrhage? You see, Nigeria is a consumer nation, is an importer, is an import-dependent nation. And that is the biggest challenge that we have. And you can't counter that without having products that will come to the international market to stop them buying those things that they are buying. And once you are an importer, an import-dependent economy, you are so vulnerable to anything that happens globally. Any global headwinds will hit you first. If it is energy crisis, it will get you. If it is a COVID health pandemic, it will catch you. If it is just American subprime mortgage crisis of 2008, what has it got to do with us? It hit our banking sector. If it is Silicon Valley Bank that is going down, what has it got to do with us? It's affecting us. So anything, everything, you are on the transmission belt of global headwinds. That's what export dependency means. And then that means you constantly ask for money, dollar, dollar, dollar. Everybody's asking for dollar, and you don't have enough of it.
Prof, there's this concern. I mean, this conversation is such that there's no end to this conversation. It's over and over. We keep having this conversation. The issue of monetary policy, and I know I brought that out earlier, that's the role of the Central Bank of Nigeria, looking at the monetary policy. The fiscal side of it, if the government is not able to handle the fiscal side, which is like a collective of many things put in there, can we achieve that economic growth? I mean, in his speech, the president said he outlined 5 principles that would guide his government. He talked about impartial governance. He talked about security and fighting terrorism and criminality. Economic growth, that's one. Inclusion of women and youth, and then proactive anti-corruption fight. Now, those are 5 principles that will guide his government. But can that take care of the angle of fiscal policy so that that economic growth that we want can actually happen?
No, all of them have some kind of relationship. The only one that is a little bit out of it is the monetary policy. Let me tell you the role of investment in fiscal policy. If you want to reduce the size of government, if you want to implement Orosanyon's report, to downsize, to do this, to fight corruption, you need to invest. If you need a new system to be able to monitor and check, you have to invest in it. Anything you want to touch, you have to invest. And then if you not talk about where corruption hits you the most, it's actually around the fiscal policy side. And of course, when you come to fight corruption, corruption will fight you back. And so all of the areas like monetary policy, so trade policy, industrial policy, how you manage poverty, how you distribute wealth, how you promote all of the taxation, all of that are in the realm of fiscal policy. So we need to get it right there, because what happens is that the fiscal policy does the borrowing, and then when it borrows, the repercussion comes to the monetary policy, because as you are borrowing, you have to service the debt. 60% of world debt is denominated in dollars. And so when the things happening in America now that are happening, interest rates are going up, monetary policy rate is going up, all of that means you're going to pay more money to service your debt. And then, of course, when you are no longer able to service the debt from your revenue, then you have more problem. Then you now begin to go to monetary policy to see whether you can get a respite. And monetary policy, of course, the key mandates of our central bank is financial system stability and price stability. But there is a secondary mandate that says promote sustainable economic development. And that is where, if you recall, the bank is also a lender of last resort. So it cannot stand by and see failure of our economic system. For example, you know the free market. You can have failure, and you do have failures. For example, one failure, every bank tells you, oh, they support agriculture, but they don't. If you support, why don't you lend? So central bank had to come in to de-risk agriculture by setting up NASA to de-risk 80% of the lending in agriculture, to actually make it possible for the banks to actually begin to lend to the sector. You go to the mining sector, they say they don't lend anything to the mining sector. So there are sectors where the money is there, but they can't lend to them. So central bank will have to intervene. Manufacturing, we're talking about value addition. How do you get value addition? Because if you invest in manufacturing sector, it has to create intervention funds to give single-digit lending to the manufacturing sector to correct the imbalance. The fact that the financial sector are not giving them money. So some of those things, agriculture, look at how much, 1 trillion went to Anchor Borrowers Program. They are doing that because they can't stand and look at the economy collapse because of the inequalities and some of those things that the market economy is not working 100%.
So quite a number of significant places then for this administration to invest in if it's really going to make progress in the areas where it is listed that they would like to make progress. What my colleague read earlier, or the principles that the president said will guide his administration, and he listed, there are 5 of them which he listed, talking about the principles. I'm going to be taking this to our guests in Lagos, Mr. Paul Igbinoba, talking about principle number 5. He says, our government will continue to take proactive steps, such as championing a credit culture to discourage corruption while strengthening the effectiveness and efficiency of the various anti-corruption agencies. Now, this credit culture is something that many people have asked for, that, young people should be able to buy things on credit. Banks should be able to give credit to people who have steady jobs so that they can buy things, houses, cars, lands, whatever it is, and pay bit by bit back to the banks within a reasonable interest rate. Now, where would you say that if we're going to establish this credit culture, where will it start from?
Well, basically, see, what has been done by the president is just to give broad policy framework. I mean, he really hasn't had time to sit down with his team to structure a more detailed policy framework. Now, credit culture, whatever, they are all bits and pieces of a broader framework. Now, basically, what should be done by this government is to emphasize a private sector-led economy, all right? Where market forces determine prices, where there's price discovery. Of course, he had already said that we try to unify the foreign exchange, rate. But not just that. There are at least 3 major markets in the economy. One is foreign exchange. Second is petroleum prices. You know, it means we have to deregulate the downstream. That's what essentially he meant by removing petrol subsidy. And thirdly, the price of electricity. 3 strategic key markets that need to be driven by market forces. When those are done, the economy will just grow, will explode, all right? And everything will just fall into place. The GDP growth rate will move. Of course, we can achieve 6% growth rate this year. I mean, African AFDB has projected that the Nigerian economy will grow by 4.1% this year, which is realistic, given the fact that in the first quarter it grew by 2.31%. Certainly, in the second quarter, it's going to grow by over 3%, probably 3.5 to 4%, or 3%. Then across third and fourth quarter, with the new signals being sent by the government about seriousness, about the willingness to take courageous policy measures that will drive the economy. Now, that is going to send the right signal to foreign investors, local investors, and before you know it, there's going to be an inflow of foreign investment. By the time we successfully unify the foreign exchange market rates, because right now there's a huge gap between the official exchange rate of about 460 and the private market rate of 775. So by the time you merge them, it sends a right signal that Nigeria is ready for business. Both local and foreign investors will begin to invest. Hello? And so
I can appreciate.
No, hold on. Just let me conclude my statement. When that happens, there'll be influx of money.
Quickly get to the question I'm asking,
the money market. Hold on. The money market will have sufficient liquidity, so the issue of credit culture will just take care of itself. Banks will be willing to lend. The interest rate will come down because of inflow. Because of sufficient liquidity. Interest will come down.
All right, let me take it to Mr. Wale Oyeride. Mr. Paul, sorry, let me quickly take this to Mr. Wale Oyeride, because I know that if there's any industry that would always need credit, I have spoken extensively about banks to lend within a certain rate. It will also be those who are in the industry, and oftentimes have spoken about high interest rates. I want to ask you if you think that there is already sufficient infrastructure on ground for banks to be able to lend, for this credit culture, because I imagine that this is to individuals, which the president will be talking about, but industries for the longest of times have said interest rates within the banking sector is untenable. They cannot access loans at the rate at which banks are currently lending. So for you, when the president speaks about a credit culture, championing a credit culture to discourage corruption, what immediately sticks out for you? What infrastructure do you think needs to be in place, if it isn't already in place? And if it is in place, how do you think it needs to be strengthened for individuals to now be able to access this?
Thank you once again. I think for us, it's a matter of, we'll look at the value chain within the context of the credit culture that you mentioned. And first is the credit to organized businesses, which currently is in short form, because even government borrowing has crowded out the private sector from borrowing. And the high rate of interest that we are currently witnessing has also made borrowing less attractive, because you borrow, and from what you have borrowed, you realize you still have to take care of your power needs. You still have to mind the inhospitable environment created by regulatory agencies. So looking at it holistically, it makes borrowing for you a bit unattractive. So we'll request the president to look at the framework within the context of that regulatory environment. The interest rate must come down for us to drive productive activities. Now, on the part of the individual, if we get the right framework that protects not only the bank, but also ensure that those that we borrow, we compel them to be responsible enough to return what they have borrowed progressively, will also be helping not only the individual, we will also be helping the industries, because as you increase the capacity of the individual to buy, or you increase their capacity to purchase or to consume, you are also increasing the capacity of the industries, of the businesses to expand. So while the credit scheme or the credit culture that the president has mentioned is quite laudable, I think what we need to tidy up at the back end is the regulatory framework to make sure that the bank actually lend to businesses that are genuine and needs those funds, and also to the individuals, so that directly or indirectly, we are empowering the individuals to empower the business. And as you are empowering the business, you are also empowering the community, you are empowering and dealing with the issue of unemployment. So it's one policy that has the potential to address many other policies or many other challenges that we currently face. So it's a welcome development for us. And as I mentioned earlier, the framework and the will to implement all these policies decisively will determine whether the president has just read a nice poetry to us, or whether there are policies, there are comments that the government will implement once again decisively.
Well, the speech does say that in the coming days we will be able to see just how that will be, will play out. But one of the things which I know my colleagues who cover the National Assembly will also be looking to see is this Omnibus Jobs and Prosperity Bill. The president speaks about working with the National Assembly to fashion an Omnibus Jobs and Prosperity Bill, which he says will give his administration the policy space to embark on labor-intensive infrastructural improvements, encourage light industry, and provide improved social services for the poor, elderly, and vulnerable. So before I bring it to Professor Ken Ife, let me ask you what you would like to see in that Omnibus Bill, and if it's something that your industry is hoping to contribute to.
Thank you once again. We had a bill recently signed by the past administration, the Business Facilitation Bill, which also creates, we give some elements or create some structures to facilitate ease of doing business. So in whatever omnibus bill that is coming or the president is proposing, one of the key things that we also like to see, and which we definitely contribute to, will be further facilitating the ease of doing business. We have our rating at the World Bank Ease of Doing Business rating, but for our perspective, beyond the rating, you need to come to the shop floor. You need to come visit the businesses and see the reality on ground beyond the rating that we have, or beyond the improvement that we tout. There is need for a definitive and practical way of gauging our rating within the context of ease of doing business. The regulatory environment must be addressed squarely. The legislative environment. Beautiful you mentioned the legislatures, because in the 9th Assembly, we have instances where the legislature itself, where the NAS itself, they constituted bottlenecks to business growth. They constituted bottlenecks to effective and efficient running of even private businesses. So that alignment between the legislature, between the presidency, is very important for us to achieve whatever milestone we plan to achieve with the Omnibus bill that the president has mentioned. And suffice to say, you can't create a policy, you can't create a bill over the head of those that the bill will affect. We call for a deepened engagement, and that is very important, a deepened engagement between the government and the organized private sector, and in fact, all stakeholders, so that we can get the right buy-in from the point of policy formulation. We don't just form policies or create laws and we ask people to just queue behind those laws or policies and make it work, while we have created inherent bottlenecks in those policies and laws. So engagement is quite key, and you can be rest assured that the organized private sector is open and willing to continue to engage, to continue to profile policy options to make sure that we achieve the kind of growth that we desire to achieve at the quickest possible time.
Thank you very much. Let me bring it to you, Professor Kenife. I know you did want to also intervene on that credit culture question, but credit culture question, as well as this omnibus bill as well.
Okay. Nigeria is basically, I mean, the president actually got it right here. Nigeria is a cash economy. If you want a house, you buy 100%. You want a car, you buy 100%. And that can't fly if you want to grow the economy. What was missing is in the part of the private sector, in the manufacturing space and all of that, encourage them to do more leasing, lease financing, higher purchase financing. Let the law encourage them because it's more tax efficient. If you go and buy something 100%, 100 million, you're going to have to wait the amortization. You know, you look at how, when depreciation, if with the capital goods, it may be 20 years, it may be 10 years, you carried all your cash and dumped it. You know, your cash is not working for you. But you could put 10% down and then release 90% and you run your business and do other things while you pay over time. And you can pass all that expenditure straight through your book in that year. Not efficient. So that's the more efficient way. Consumer consumption, expansion, credit expansion is one thing that we've been asking for years. Consumer credit expansion. Now, if you are earning, you know, you can get mortgage because they will look at your salary and then you pay. You know, then you can buy any goods. You can have credit. Go into any supermarket. Go to any shop. Put 10% to drive away the car. The manufacturer starts manufacturing more cars. 2 years later, you come back, drop that car, take a new car. So the man that is manufacturing car is getting business, and then the price of second-hand cars will go down immediately. 200,000 second-hand cars are imported every year into Nigeria. Well, 400,000. But we get brand new cars, 200,000. So the 400,000 are coming through Cotonou every year. You won't need that money. You won't pay that money if you have a credit that allows Nigeria to buy these cars made in Nigeria and then they change. So that makes a huge difference. Manufacturers benefit because the capacity to buy is now enhanced and will continue to buy their goods, and the economy will go on autopilot. If you do this, economy goes on autopilot. The investment that they require, manufacturers don't need to go to commercial banks.
What about taste? What about taste and beliefs? I want to quickly, because you just talked about cars, and I'm just thinking in my head, if I get a credit facility, for instance, to buy a car, the average Nigerian, would they want to buy a second-hand car, maybe a Mercedes, as opposed to buying a locally made, say, Innocent car or even a Geely, as the case might be? Do you really think that our tastes as Nigerians would immediately encourage this, would go along the line that you're already speaking to?
You see, when the demand comes for the manufacturer, he can do anything that you need. He can bring new brands, new cars, armored cars, because you will just pay 10% and you drive off that car. Anything that you want, and other people can come into the market that actually make Mercedes because they can see the profile, the buying capacity, and they will come into the marketplace. But I was going to the credit. The credit side makes it possible for anybody who is producing to produce more. Okay, if you look at mortgage, why did you have to bring mortgage refinance? Because when you give somebody mortgage to build houses, they will build 200 houses, then they are sitting down for 2 years waiting to sell them. No. You go and get a remortgage finance. So they will give you 80% of the value of what you have built. You start building more. So he is building more, and then people taking time to sell. The economy expands. And that's where you get growth from the economy. More people are employed, more is consumed, output is increased. You see all of them in your GDP. But it's not the same with what we're happening to. Now, on the one of banks, forget the banks for now. The banks will come. It's better for the banks to play catch-up game. Why? Ask CBN to license credit service providers. And Mr. Thatcher did that. When I went to UK for my PhD in 1980, he exploded that industry and then allowed the euro dollar, the Far East, not the Middle East, petrodollar, they came in and then they were lending. And when they were lending, more people, can you imagine people bringing tens of billions of dollars into your economy to do that credit finance? And that is an investment. What then happens is that they may pay higher than the interest rate though, but it is spread over 3 years. You buy something, you are going to pay with interest. but it's spread over 3 years. But then that 90% left, you can use it to do other things. You can start building a house, take the loan, buy a car, take the loan, and then expansion. And then over time, competition, the banks will now come in.
Okay, it will be interesting to see how the banks react to that, because I'm sure that maybe they will not want other credit financiers to come in. Maybe they will want to take up the baton. But we'll look at to see how that goes. Kayode and Ayo.
Mark, when you began to talk to Prof about loans, credit, the credit culture thing, the first thing that came to my mind was the People's Bank experience, God forbid. But then we also have a template with the Bank of Industry, hoping that will go better there. Well, Mr. Igbunova, one of the questions that comes to my mind in all of these is the youth population. I saw a data recently that says Nigeria is the youngest country in the world, because the median age is between 17 and 19. And we're talking about growing the economy, expanding agriculture, monetary policy, and all those things. How, also speaking to micro, small, and medium enterprises, because I'm almost certain that that's where they also operate, that the young people operate. Business education is largely lacking. Consequently, if you give loans and all those facilities, the understanding may not be there to sustain those things. As I said, the People's Bank experience comes to mind. So what infrastructure needs to be installed, or what kind of business education model do we need to adopt for young people to know what to do and how to run business profitably and directly or indirectly grow the economy along the line?
Okay, thanks for that question, but let me just quickly address an issue very quickly before I come. Now, the silver bullet, quote unquote, that we need to fix the economy, all right? I'm sure this government will soon come out with that, is a private sector-led economy where market forces determines prices. Once that is done, everything falls into place. All right, there'll be liquidity, there'll be investment, the foreign and local. Prices will come down. When GDP starts growing and there's production, if interest rate comes, inflation comes down, interest rate also comes down. In any case, right now, interest rate is 22.2%. All right, inflation rate is 22%.
Interest is 18%.
All right, now the monetary policy rate is 18.5. Yeah. The effective interest rate out there is around 30%. Prime rate is around 14% right now. Now, by the time you have a focused economy, a focused policy framework that signals to local and foreign investors that Nigeria is ready for business, I tell you, in 2 years' time, things start falling into place. Okay. Then the issue of encouraging entrepreneurship, because it goes back to entrepreneurship. Now, the SMEDA, that's the Small Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria, has done a lot in that area vis-a-vis the Bank of Industry, all right? And you realize that the current generation of Nigerian youth are so focused on entrepreneurship. They are, the buzzword now is, side hustle, or what have you. So Nigerian youth their mindset have been recalibrated for entrepreneurship. So all that government needs to do is just to encourage that process, all right, by expanding the scope for, as you said, empowerment them in the area of knowledge and skills in business. That is ongoing, but that can be expanded. That can be expanded, But the basic thing is to create a base for private sector entrepreneurs, be they young or older. Okay. Now, when we're talking about the youth population, of course, we have a young population. The basic thing is to educate them. Right now, Nigeria spends less than 10%, less than 7% of its budget, both federal and local, on education. That's very low. Okay. The minimum should be 15%. That's the SDG 4. But by the time you invest in education, okay, that will also affect, that will educate the young population. Okay. It will empower them in terms of academic knowledge and skills, as well as business education.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah. Well, you just put a question mark for me. That issue you raised put a question mark on the entire NYSC initiative, because part of the ambits of the NYSC initiative is to raise the entrepreneurial capacity of the graduates. But let me ask Mr. Yerinde this next question. Your industry operates in a situation where the micro, small, medium enterprises and anyone who can belongs to NECA. How strong would you say rural infrastructure are to encourage some of the promises of the president in terms of agriculture, saying that agricultural hubs will be created? He talked about reducing waste, nationwide program for storage and other facilities to reduce spoilage and waste. One of the issues that came to my mind is rural roads. And I know there is a World Bank-enabled program called RAMP, Rural Access and Mobility Project, empowered by the World Bank. But how strong do you see those ones in the area of helping to move products from the rural areas and farmlands into the modern urban cities without excessive costs? The roads are still quite an issue, don't you think?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. The infrastructure as we have it currently is basically not adequate. A lot still has to be done within the context of investment. Government should try as much as possible to encourage private sector participation in all these processes. We've collected loans, collected credits from China, from everywhere to build rail, to build these infrastructures. I think we should encourage more private sector investment in the building of this infrastructure. Currently, those infrastructures are not adequate. And if you call Benue State the food basket of the nation, you call so many states different names. We have minerals everywhere, every state in this country. Priority should be given in building those infrastructures. If you really want to reduce waste, really have to build those infrastructures. You know, in time past, long ago in the 70s, we have the commodity boards. We have the storage facility that the president mentioned. I think it's time for us to get the private sector to be involved in building and supporting this infrastructure. That is one of the ways for us to go. Also, I want to mention the issue of the hubs, building hubs. I think it's also a direction that we should have a framework that will drive that process. We should have business hubs. We should have industrial hubs. We should have incubators that will encourage our young persons to be productive and to exercise their creativity. You know, building these infrastructures, they are not really expensive. And if you permit me,
it looks like you and Mr. Binoba, agree on having the private sector play a huge role, in the economy. And let's just wind down with this, and I'll take this to Professor Ken Ife. Final words now. It is day 2 of the Tinubu administration. Yes, there was all the pomp and pageantry. Yes, some announcements made and all of that. You have vast experience in, development economy. What kind of meetings, what kind of decisions or deliberations do you expect right now within, the camp of the president to achieve some of these, lofty ideas, this agenda that we have set for him?
Now, I think the president should be mindful of the potential disruption to his plan from today. He gave a notice that in the next 30 days, there will be fuel subsidy will be removed. It hasn't been removed. It's still to be removed. You have 30 days to enter into serious negotiation with stakeholders, critical stakeholders. A lot of those stakeholders are against removing. Get them on the table. There are those stakeholders that are actually producing, example, Dangote. Then there are the NNPC. Get the stakeholders near. The reason is this. Don't think that Dangote is going to subsidize fuel that is going to cross the border. And don't think that he's going to pay huge amounts to buy fuel, crude from 3 continents, and then come and sell it as a subsidy to you. It's not going to happen. Don't forget again that it's in a free trade zone. He's only going to be allowed to do 40% unless there's a special dispensation to the country. And if he's going to import fuel, crude, for somebody to process and take back to them, you can't tell them to do the same thing. Nigeria does crude swap, they refine for us, and they bring it back. So you can't tell somebody that's refining for somebody to, after refining, give it to you to consume. So there's going to be a discussion. It's going to be on the table. And the NNPC has to come out clean on what the hell they are doing with getting the refinery ready, so that we can actually see alignments and see how this transition. If you have to do gradual increase in price, you have to do.
Pardon me, Prof. Essentially, right what you're saying now is, I mean, there's going to be several meetings, and it's like you're already giving them the bullet points of the things that they have to put into consideration in all of this. We're completely out of time because we have just one more leg before we go. We have to thank you very much for your time this morning. Professor Ken Ife is a development economist. Thank you so much for your time, as well as Mr. Wale Oyonide, who is DG Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA, joined us virtually from Ikoyi in Lagos. Thank you so much for your time, as well as Mr. Paul Ibinoba, who joined us here in the studio. He's an economist, business consultant, and he's team lead at ProServe Options, Economic Research, Business and Strategy Consulting. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
We'll take a break now. When we return, our last leg this morning, still on that speech, but this time security. Just stay with us.
On behalf of the government and the good people of Imo State, I, Senator Hope Uzodinma, Governor of Imo State, most heartily congratulate Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu as he assumes office as the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I equally also congratulate Senator Ibrahim Shatima on his assumption of office as the Vice President. This is a new dawn in Nigeria, as two patriots who have served as both governors and senators take over the reins of leadership as President and Vice President respectively in their country. As always, our new President and his Vice can count on the overall support of the government and the good people of Imo State as they navigate the ship of Nigeria into an enduring prosperity. Congratulations, sirs. Signed, Senator Hope Uzodinma, Governor.
My people, you know, say election don't finish now. You don't elect president, elect governor, National Assembly members, State of Assembly members. But matter see the tribunal. Well, we have to move forward. First of all, the person where you send go office, it be like say you send a message. Suppose they check upon him, suppose they call him. You suppose they ask him the money where I put for your hand. How you take the manager? Employment, opportunities where you promise me for manifesto. You go do them, I be you no do them. Now here, budgets come make it simple for you. If you track government budget, how government takes spend money for your area from budget.org. You even fit track public projects, all the roads, the schools, the hospitals for your area. Tracker.ng. You even fit on allocation for your state, for your local government. me.budget.org. Now, the matter in your hand. The person where you send go office, you supposed to make sure say they work for you. This message now from Budget.
When you have cavities, it hurts so bad it makes you miss school. Even football.
But we prevent cavities before they form with Colgate. Colgate locks calcium in.
Keeps cavities out!
The Duchess International Hospital opened its doors in October 2021. The mission of the hospital is to reverse medical tourism. We take particular care here at the Duchess to bring together a combination of the brightest and the best locally, as well as Nigerians in the diaspora who are interested in returning to do very good work for the benefit of our patients here in this country.
The good thing is that we have all international expertise here, all international facilities here, international people working here. Everything is coming together in a space which was considered not great in terms of the availability of healthcare.
Access Bank, of course, has been able to provide us with a robust range of products and services that has enabled us to deliver that standard and quality of healthcare that is integral to our mission as an organization.
On behalf of the government and the good people of Imo State, I, Senator Hope Uzodinma, Governor of Imo State, most heartily congratulate Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu as he assumes office as the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I equally also congratulate Senator Ibrahim Shatima on his assumption of office as the Vice President. This is a new dawn in Nigeria, as two patriots who have served as both governors and senators take over the reins of leadership as President and Vice President respectively in their country. As always, our new President and his Vice can count on the overall support of the government and the good people of Imo State as they navigate the ship of Nigeria into an enduring prosperity. Congratulations, sirs. Signed, Senator Hope Uzodinma, Governor.
Our government will continue to take proactive steps, such as championing a credit culture, to discourage corruption, while strengthening the effectiveness and efficiency of the various anti-corruption agencies. That's to be a continued work in progress. Security shall be top priority of our administration, because neither prosperity nor justice can prevail amid insecurity and violence. To effectively tackle this, we shall reform both our security doctrine and its architecture. We shall invest more in our security personnel, and it means more than an increase in number. We shall provide better training, equipment, pay, and power.
Well, security is next. Some will say, in fact, it's one of the most important things, because there will be no economy without security. And as you can see, we're joined by Mr. Dennis Amakri, former Assistant Director at the SSS. He joins us virtually from New York this morning. Thank you for staying up late to have this conversation with us, Mr. Amakri. It's good to see you again.
Good morning. Good morning.
Well, Nigeria moved from the government of a general now to the government of Tinubu. A lot of people had high hopes for the Buhari government, especially because of his experience. Now, this is a new president who does not have that kind of experience in the area of security, but nevertheless, he has made very, very big promises regarding security. Talked about, defending the nation from terror and all criminalities that threaten the peace and stability of our country and our sub-region. And he went on and on. But generally speaking, listening to him speak about security, he's now the commander-in-chief anyway. How did they hit you as a security person?
Thank you very much for having me. Well, it does not have to be a general, he's the commander-in-chief. He has people, professionals under him who are going to advise him and, of course, carry out the security measures that are required in a country like ours. But you see, right now, he's taking over at a time when the security situation is really, really bad. Really, really bad, because it was even worse than when the former government came into power. Because right now we have all kinds of situations, threats that are happening in the north, northwest, northeast, in the south, southeast, and all kinds of agitation. And people are not very, very comfortable traveling across the country. So these are issues that he's going to be facing with. But if he handles it properly, I think things will go well. I am very happy when he talked about, looking at two major areas: the diligence, the doctrine, and then, of course, the architecture. So let's see how it progresses.
I think it's important to break that very point down because for a lot of people they've heard, in fact, the former president has talked about rejigging the security architecture not once, not twice. Now we're hearing the president again saying that we'll reform, he didn't just say architecture, but security doctrine. Can you break this down for us? What is security doctrine? What is security architecture? So at least we can keep track of whatever changes or otherwise that are made.
Okay. Every country have a national interest, and these national interests are designed from the security doctrine, from your security strategy, so to say. In Nigeria, we have a document called the National Security Strategy, which was written in 2019. And that document actually was trying to make sure that besides strengthening the infrastructures of security, security will be moved towards human-centric, that is, security of the citizens. That's what it was designed to do. But unfortunately, that was not achieved. And I hope that maybe now that he's talking about security doctrine, they will have to take back that document, look at it properly, and then, of course, tighten up the situation. Because when it comes to doctrine, there are issues that we have to really come to terms with. One, national sovereignty, national integrity, territorial integrity, and all kinds of the well-being of the people. But if these things are not met, then we are left in the cold. One thing that I am very worried about all the time is that term, national interest. Now, what is our national interest? That has to be fully defined, and this government will have to, if they are going into the doctrine of it, I think that's number one area to start. What is Nigeria's national interest? Sometimes it flows into foreign affairs where they'll say, oh, Nigerian foreign policy. Nigeria is the center of Africa is the center
of the delivery
or whichever,
President yesterday, Mr. Macri, but maybe over time we'll hear more on that from him. But when you're talking about this security thing, doctrine, infrastructure, and all those things, the question that comes to my mind is the collaboration with ministries, departments, and agencies, and then collaboration with states. That seems to be largely lacking. And the former President Buhari, repeatedly called for that collaboration of the various security agencies. So how do you see that happening in this new dispensation? It's never a challenge at the top, but when it comes to the men, the foot soldiers, that seems to be where we usually have issues. How do we circumvent that?
We have a major salient problem in the country. And that problem is patriotism. Nigerians are not patriotic. And if they are not patriotic, it becomes very difficult to preach security to any other kind of agency, of government, or to the people themselves.
When you're talking about patriotism, are you talking about the patriotism of the average Nigerian or patriotism of the officers and men of the various security agencies?
All of them, all of the above. The security operatives have to be patriotic. The Nigerians have to be patriotic so that we have something to look at. And when you do this, number one, symbols of national patriotism our national anthem, our national flag. These are issues that, you know, we had this issue with IPOP people burning the Nigerian flag all over the place in the East and stuff like that. These are very far-reaching issues. Now, our flag is not respected. Our national anthem is not even respected. In fact, I have a suggestion, which I have been discussing with some of my colleagues. Let us change the national anthem, because the present one does not make any sense. It does not make any meaning. Nigerians cannot relate to it. You can relate to the old national anthem, because when you are looking at symbols for a nation, you talk of land, you talk of the flag, you talk of patriotism, you know, to these things. We are not proud to be Nigerians. How do we become proud? We have to be patriotic, you know. And
Mr. Makri,
yes.
in that speech of the president, he talked about looking at the person of the security operative, in investing in the personnel. What area, where do you think he should start? Because when you say we are not patriotic, patriotism sometimes is born out of the investments gotten from the nation to the individual. So where do you think the president and his team should start when he says we're going to invest in the personnel, the security personnel?
Fantastic. Thank you for that question. I was very happy. Line where he said that he's going to invest in security personnel, not just equipment. You know, equipment is okay, fine. You can keep them up. Training is one of the part investment in personnel, because a well-trained security personnel is an efficient one. It's going to be an efficient one. And we need to train them. You look at the police, look at the DSS. A lot of people in the DSS, you'll be surprised to know, are, you know, people who just are there thinking that it's just another civil service. So what do? You weed a lot of them out. Get them out, employ top-notch security intelligence officers. How do you do that? Go to the universities, get students who are graduating first class or first class upper, second class upper, and recruit them into the service. These days, you have people who are coming in with a note from a senator and, you know, causing problem for everybody because they come in there and they are not ready to do the work. So there must be weed in there, and then the remaining, you know, serious people must be well trained to world-class level and then kitted, because intelligence today is not just you know, giving security reports from local government or from state to somewhere. Security intelligence has gone beyond, you know, and is now in the realm of the electronic spectrum. So how many of them are well trained in that? We need to have people like that, because if you want to compete in the international playground, you must be kitted properly. And I'm happy that he's saying that he's going to train them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Makri. Really do appreciate this conversation. We will definitely come back to you as regards what should be done with the security architecture, infrastructure, doctrine, and all that, including the personnel. Thank you so much. Mr. Dennis Makri is a former assistant director of the SSS, and he joined us virtually from New York. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.
And it's time to find out what you have to say about our conversation today. We have this mail from Dixon Eka, who says, I congratulate President Bola Tinubu on his inauguration as the 16th president of Nigeria. The new president should hit the ground running to correct many nepotistic acts and inactions of his predecessor. All security heads and top revenue-generating agencies must not come from one region of the country. And Inspector General of Police cannot stay in the office even after retirement as if we don't have other competent hands. Certain things such as local refining of crude oil and a holistic approach to operations of modular refineries should be worked out before an outright removal of fuel subsidy. Ranching of cattle should be considered to avoid herders-farmers clash. I wish him well in the coveted office of the President of Nigeria, Dixon Eka. There.
And Henry Ewunono says the proposals, that's talking about Tinubu's economic agenda. He says the proposals appear superfluous and at variance with Buhari's, which he promised to continue with. They will be achievable if the people are forced back to work and politicians stop milling around the corridors of power. If zero budgeting replaces the envelope system, if strategic planning and diligent execution is prioritized without the temptation of erecting elephant projects to attract accolades, while the intangibles like education, healthcare services, and ethical reorientation suffer. Congratulations, Mr. President. The honeymoon ended at Eagle Square yesterday. Well, indeed, you can say that maybe the president of the shortest honeymoon ever. Ayo and Kennedy.
Was there ever any sort of honeymoon? That's a question for a lot of people, but
hit the ground running.
Oh, flying, actually. Olagunjo Oladele has this one saying every new administration in Nigeria is bound to meet and deal with an existing problem which falls under the umbrella of politics, saying this has made every president set an unattainable goal. These issues are not a recent phenomenon, nor a short-lived one, and the mail goes on. Thank you very much.
This last one, I believe, is from Festus Akimboyewa, who says, and I quote, "Government for the past 20 years have not given Nigerians quality living through the provision of basic needs, quality infrastructure, security, and jobs for our teeming youths. President Tinubu's government must prioritize the welfare of all Nigerians."
Is where we'll say thank you for letting us be a part of your morning. Do have yourself a beautiful rest of the day. I'm Neota Igbe.
Thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Yusuf. Goodbye.
Well, let's make this our best day yet. I'm Kayode Kikelu.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of your day.